So hello and welcome to You So You. My name's Zoe and this is my channel all about the crafty bits and pieces I get up to. I knit, I sew, I spin on a drop spindle, I dabble in weaving from time to time, and anything else that takes my crafty fancy. And today we're looking at all the things I've been working on in August. So grab a brew, put your feet up and let's get started. Welcome back to any returning viewers, and to any new viewers a very warm welcome to you. Now we're rounding up all the things that I've been working on in August this week, so without any further ado, let's get going with what I am wearing. This is the Calais shirt by Closet Core Patterns, which I made probably a couple of years ago now. It's had an awful lot of wear all year round. It's great in the summer because it's a light floaty fabric. I want to say it's a viscose, but I can't remember. It is linked on my Minerva profile, which is in the description down below. So if you scroll back through my projects until you see the pictures of this, there'll be more details on the fabric and everything there. And if the fabric is still available, you'll be able to link through from my project to the fabric should you want it. In the winter, I layered it up with vests and a cardigan, and yeah, it's a good all year round shirt. So liking this. Now let's move on to finished objects, because I do have some. Those of you who've been watching for a little while will have seen a couple of my mid-month videos this month have been on paper crafting, which is a rabbit hole that I have well and truly fallen down this month. I took part in the Rebecca Page paper crafting summit towards the beginning of the month. It's a free summit. She does them throughout the year with various different crafts. This time round it was paper craft. She's done knitting, she's done crochet, she's done quilting, she's probably done some others. Those are the ones I'm aware of. It takes place for like a week, and you have the option to buy lifetime access to the courses, which I haven't done just because my budget didn't allow it. But the free one's pretty good. Access to a Facebook group and all that kind of stuff. So first up, let's look at some paper cutting. Now this was the craft that I did on my attempt at a live. Bit of an experiment. I didn't let you guys know that I was doing it because I didn't know I was doing it until the night before. Technical difficulties. So the template that we were given for the paper cutting for the Rebecca Page Paper Summit was one that you printed out and then traced onto the back of the paper that you were going to be working on. And it looks like this. Floppy paper. Okay, so you get half the design. So you fold your paper in half and trace this pattern onto it. That way you get a symmetrical design. It's designed for a photo to go in the middle. I haven't yet decided what's going to go in the middle of mine. So the designer that was running the lesson, she had her surname at the top between these two birds and this banner here. I've seen people do like a heart there as well. I'm going to wait until I know what picture is going to go in the middle, then I'll decide what I'm going to cut out the top. So you cut through the two layers together, gives you a symmetrical design, and all of your pencil marks are on the back, so if they don't show, you don't need to worry about rubbing them out, and if there's accuracy issues, it's not a problem. So that's my first bit of paper cutting that I ever did, and I'm pretty pleased with that. And in the live video, if you've watched it back, because where I didn't let you guys know, it was an experiment in the technology. It was good. I'm thinking about bringing live streams at some sort of every few months or so, I don't know, into my schedule for this channel. So the technology works, and that's good. You will have seen during that live video that I had intended on doing the practice pieces from a book that I bought to learn a bit more about papercraft and develop my skills a bit. It's Adventures in Paper Cutting, which you can buy online. And I'd cut out all of the practice pieces, like this flower, and I'd filmed me doing it, all of them, and I was going to do some editing and speeding up the footage and what have you. But when I uploaded the footage onto my computer, the computer said, yeah, we don't recognise this file. Which was weird, because a lot of the footage I'd done on the webcam attached to my computer and saved it straight onto the computer. So I was trying out my new webcam to get some overhead footage. But yeah, computer didn't like it. So I've got all these leaves and things that I've cut out and I need to decide what I'm going to do with them. I'm thinking maybe a shadow frame of some sort and doing something layered with them. Some sort of wall art anyway. So those were the practice pieces, because you get a practice page in the Adventures in Paper Cutting book, and then you get multiple copies of several designs, and the designs increase in complexity as you go through the book, so you can level up your skills as you go through. So the one that I cut out during that stream was this bug. I've not done any more since, because I've moved on to completing a few other projects. I will be going back to paper cutting, I just haven't yet. So I'm thinking those leaves and flowers and this bug, and possibly the other bugs that are in the book as well. For the first section is like insects. I'm thinking I could do some nice sort of wall art in some sort of shadow frame or something with those, or a series of shadow frames with them in on a coloured background. I think that'd look quite cool. So that's those done. That's my paper cutting endeavours. And yeah, like I say, it is something that I will be coming back to at some point. I'm just going to rescue the one that I've dropped on the floor before I stand on it. So there we go. I don't want to stand on this one because this one's pretty. So I will be coming back to paper cutting at some point. I think it'd be really good for cards and that sort of thing, and gift tags as well as wall art. So yes, it's quite meditative. If you're designing it yourself, it's going to be a little bit more intensive. But if you're buying templates already made, which is what I've got so far, it's going to be quite therapeutic, I think. Because you just sit there and mindfully try not to chop your fingers off. Paper and a craft knife is all you need. It's a really accessible craft, and I'm loving that about paper crafting, that it's so accessible. Almost everybody, I'm qualifying that with almost because circumstances, but almost everybody will have some paper that they can access for little to no cost. So it's just a question of getting a craft knife if you want to do paper cutting. The next craft that I did a video on that came from the Paper Crafting Summit is quilling. Now, I took part in 3 quilling classes during the course of the summit. The first one was this letter L, which has been filled in with flowers and swirls and leaves and things. Mine's a little bit on the wonky side, but that's largely down to my tracing, I think, because with this project it's backed on watercolour paper, and the next one, which were both by the same instructor. You trace the pattern onto the watercolour paper, but you don't trace it with like pencil as such. You use the paper that's got the template on top of the watercolour paper, and you press the pencil or whatever device you're using to trace it over the printer paper that's on top of the watercolour paper, and it indents the outline of what you're going to use into the watercolour paper. So you don't have to worry about pencil marks. So that's cool. But somehow I've ended up wonky. I will probably try this again with my partner's initial, because I think it's quite cool, and I think, again, nice little bit of wall art, decor somewhere around the house. Again, would be good for cards and that kind of thing. So that's number 1 quilling project. Number 2 quilling project, and as I say, this was by the same instructor, is this heart, which has again got flowers on it. So these are more 3D flowers, a bit more complex than the ones on the letter. But yeah, again, traced on in the same way, backed on watercolour paper. So this was the project that I took my inspiration from for the quilling video that I did a little while ago. I will be trying to link videos that I'm mentioning at the top as we go through the editing of this one. So as long as I remember, they'll be there. So this was the project that I did for the video. So I just did a little bookmark with a single one of those 3D flowers on the end. Really simple, really quick. Again, nice and accessible. Strips of paper, you can buy them pre-cut, you can cut your own. Something to wind them round, and a bit of glue. The third class that I took part in during the Paper Crafting Summit, I need to put my teeth back in. So the third quilling class that I took was this butterfly. The instructor had you make it hang from a card with a window cut out in it, and she put a magnet on the back, so she had two back stuck together, and then the person who receives the card can take them off and use them as fridge magnets. But I just made the butterfly, and that's pretty cool. I really like the petals that have been used for the wings. It doesn't massively read butterfly to me, I have to say. It's a bit more stylised, which is fine if you're going for that style. I think the next time I do a butterfly, I'll try and do one that's a little bit more proportioned like the butterflies I see, rather than the stylised version they say. I mean, it's pretty, and I will probably make them like this again at some point, but I would also like to do a quilled butterfly that's a little bit more proportioned like the butterflies I see flying around my garden. So, but yeah, really cool little craft. This one, you outline the petals in a different colour to tie them together, I guess, and to give that a little bit of an edge. And the body has been done with three or four different colours all on top of each other, that you then quill up together. So yeah, so some interesting techniques in that one as well. The antennae was done with the papers folded in half, so double layered. So enjoying the quilling, again, nice and accessible, easy to get hold of the stuff. There are lots and lots and lots of quilling tools that you can get if you choose to, and online you can buy boxes that are storage boxes with lots of quilling tools and papers inside, so that's quite a budget friendly way of getting yourself initially set up, but you don't need lots of tools to get started. You can get by with just some quilling strips, either pre-cut or cut yourself, and a quilling tool or something to roll your papers around. The quilling tools have a little spike with a slit in it, so you get tighter coils, and they're not expensive. So yeah, so again, nice, accessible, affordable craft. What shall we show you next? We're still on the paper crafting. Let's have a look at this little book that I made. So this class, we made little ribbon bound books, and they are plain paper inside. So it's designed for drawings and doodles and that kind of thing. This, I had ribbon in stash already. Again, ribbon, not hard to get hold of, not expensive. The pages are made out of printer paper, so again, I already had that. And the cover is some wrapping paper that I already had. The instructor used wallpaper, I think, if I remember rightly. But it was she used a heavier weight paper. I've just used wrapping paper because that's what I had. Super easy. No sew little book. She had you fold the pages up, so this is one piece of paper folded in half and in half again, and she had you punch holes in them. Then you put the signatures, look at me using bookbinding terms, signatures together, and you just thread whatever you're using to bind your book together. I've used some cotton yarn that I had left over from a project. Hopefully that's showing up there. You just thread it through. Hole punch, paper, ribbon. Job done. So yeah. I can see me making more books. I do want to do some actual sewn bound books with hard covers and that kind of thing, but that's a project for another time, because it's not like I have multiple projects that need finishing that have been on the go for years. She says with her Kanban board just in her periphery, which is got lots of crafting projects up on there that are things that have already started that need finishing. Yeah, we'll get to that eventually. So the last 3 classes that I took were all origami classes for the Paper Craft Summit. So I've made several things. Start with the ones that look the simplest. And I'm going to say look the simplest because it's origami. They're not simple. You have to know what you're doing. I mean, it's not a complicated concept to get your head around, but you need to know where all the folds are. So first up we have these little square boxes. I've made 2, and they are lidded boxes, so I've used plain origami paper for the base, which you fold in exactly the same way as the top. You just fold this one so it comes out a little bit smaller, changing the placement of some of the folds ever so slightly. And I've used this printed blue and white, hopefully that's not blowing out too much, patterned paper for the lid. So I have 2 little boxes. Don't know what I'm going to use them for, but they're pretty, so they're going to sit around somewhere. And the same instructor as did this class also did a class for a multi-purpose item that, depending on how you thread the ribbon, can either be a tree ornament or a gift box. Or a hanging ornament, I should say. It doesn't need to specifically be a tree. So this is the ornament version, where you hang it up. And then in pyramid, this has got gold dragonflies on a blue and white background. This one is also meant to be a gift box, but I ripped one of the holes at the top, because you use a hole punch to put holes in. As I was threading the ribbon through, I messed up, and yeah. The third one that I made, this one, the ribbon has been tied differently, so I can, if I want to, undo the ribbon carefully so that I don't tear the paper, because I want to do it back up again afterwards. If I undo the ribbon, I can actually open this one out, and you've got a little gift box. She suggested using them as like advents, which is a nice little idea. Putting a little sweet or something in there. As well as just hanging them from your Christmas tree or wherever. And she made them in different sizes. Obviously, the bigger the paper you use for origami, the bigger the finished item is going to be. This is just with the standard origami squares that you buy online. So that's boxes and that kind of thing. There's a different instructor doing some origami creatures. So these are the sorts of things that you might be a bit more familiar with if you've seen origami around. So the first one that we made, because she did 3 and they stepped up in complexity. The first one was a butterfly, which I've used again just a standard origami square. There's my little butterfly in this green print, which is rather pretty. The next thing that she had us to do is the traditional good luck, health and wealth, and the one you make thousands of for Japanese weddings, which is the crane. So this one you may well have seen around. It's a bit more complicated. And the third one, which is the one that I'm the most proud of, because it was the most complicated, to the point where I was watching the instructions at some point. I had to re-watch sections repeatedly to work out what it was she was actually doing. Not that she wasn't explaining it while she was, it's just that when you're folding along with the video, you're watching what you're doing. So she'll say something and you need to actually see what she's doing. But when you're looking at your paper to work it out, you're not looking at what she's doing. So I had to go back and re-watch a few times. But I did manage to make a rabbit out of paper. It was the feet that caused me problems. So there's my little cute rabbit as well. So I'm dead chuffed with those. And they're going to need to find somewhere to live where they're not going to get jumped on by a cat. Or blown over by a fan. They've been sitting up here recently. So I've got a pile of books just out of shot. They've been sitting on the top of that. So they'll probably go back there for the time being. Now I do have 2 more finished objects to show you, and they're not papercraft related. So the first one, I was fortunate enough to win a giveaway on Instagram run by Hamble Mouse, and she makes the finished item and kits to make historically inspired pockets. Yeah, just the pocket, not a garment, just the pocket. So historically speaking, before people worked out how to put pockets in the seams of clothes, pockets came separately and you would tie them on. So they come with some sort of belting contraption, string, yarn, probably tape. I'm not a historical costumer, or a costume historian even. But you would tie them on, and women would wear them under their skirts because historical skirts were sectioned and again were tied round, and there would be slits where they met, so you would wear them inside your skirts. You could wear them outside your skirts as well, and they were bigger. The women's pockets tend to be today, because isn't that the way things go? As men's clothes started getting inseam pockets, women still had the tie-on ones apparently. So they are an actual thing from history. But the way that Humble Mouse puts hers together, from what I gather, is not necessarily 100% historically accurate. So they're historically inspired pockets. So for the giveaway, it was simply put your name in the hat and she drew the names out. But you then got to choose which fabric you got. So bear with me a moment while I take a momentary obligatory British tea break because my throat's a little dry. Especially for you, 33rd Street Knits, British YouTuber with tea. It's maple bacon pancakes from Bird and Blend. Very nice. So as I was saying, those of us whose names got drawn out the hat got to choose which fabric we wanted for the front of our pocket. So in the kit you get instructions. For mine I got access to her video lessons as well, but I don't know whether that's standard in the kits or whether that's just because of the prize draw. So you get all the fabric that you need, you get the thread that you need, you get a needle, and you get instructions, and you get the tape to tie it on. All ready to go, and the pattern, all included in a little box, all wrapped up. The threads and everything are in a little tiny organza bag, which is dead cute as well. So I chose this purple striped fabric. So that's my front, and it came with this creamy canvasy back and a white lining fabric, as well as this tape which already had pre-sewn onto it Humble Mouse's label. So this I actually sewed entirely by hand. It's the Imogen pattern. I believe she sells her patterns separately as well. She also sells finished pockets if you don't want to make one yourself. So this was sewn together by hand using ordinary sewing thread and then embellished with purple embroidery thread that was included in the kit as well. I did think about doing a fancier stitch, particularly for this bit around the outside, but I opted to do a running stitch because of the stripes. I thought that it might be a bit busy with a decorative stitch on there. I've also done my edging with the lining showing through to the front narrower than in the instructions. Personal preference, because the lining that came with it was white and the fabric's purple. It's quite a harsh contrast, and we've already got a little bit of the back fabric showing through the slit as well. Which there may have been less if I'd have done a wider lining. I don't think there would have been much less, but there might have been. But I felt that was a bit too much of the pale colour with the purple stripes, so I wanted to keep it relatively narrow. So I've done a tiny edging. Most of Humble Mouse's pockets, the bit of the lining that shows over is about the width of the seam allowance. So yeah, so that I tie on around my waist. It's nice and roomy. I can fit my phone in there with oodles and oodles of room. So yeah, so on days where I'm wearing something that doesn't have very big pockets and I don't want to take a bag anywhere with me, historically inspired pockets. The one thing I will have to be careful of when I'm wearing it outside is obviously there's no closure, which is fine because it's going to be on my hip anyway, it'll be at the front, so it's not like it's going to be at the back with easy access. And I quite often wear longer tops, so I'll be underneath a longer top. So there's that. It'll be more of a challenge when I'm wearing it with dresses, but again, as long as I make sense about what I put in there, it should be fine. So that's my pocket. And my other finished object, before we move on to my work in progress, yes, work, singular, I do have another finished object to show you that I just finished last night. And if you are a regular viewer of my podcast and my videos, you will have seen a video a few weeks ago called What the Fluff Am I Making?, where I started delving into the world of needle felting. So I had a wire armature with pipe cleaners on that I was covering in white wool and felting it together with a needle. And I asked you what you thought I might be making from this weird sculpture thing, and I had some good guesses on that video. Somebody said a dinosaur, which weirdly enough was what my dad said. But my dad specifically said a T-Rex. But we did have somebody get the correct creature, and I will let you give yourself a pat on the back as your reward for getting the correct creature, because I haven't got anything to send out. It was indeed a hare. Here he is. He's not perfect by any means. I've opted to leave his fur a little bit looser in terms of felting it on to get a bit of texture in, and because he's got light brown underneath the dark brown, I didn't want to cover up all of the light brown, so there are places where the dark brown is thinner than the light brown, but I think that adds a little bit more realism. I didn't want the hard edges between the dark brown and the light brown. And obviously, the mouth. This is a challenge. It's nice and rewarding. It's fun to do because it's a craft where you get to stamp stuff. So that's good. The whiskers were really hard to put in at the end. I don't know if you can see the whiskers. They're really fine. You poke holes in them and stick them in with glue. That was difficult. But yeah, it's a very rewarding craft, and you can take as long as you like on it. And where he's got wire inside, I can pose him and change him. He does sit up by himself. I think I'm going to call him Harold, mostly because I've just watched Vikings Valhalla. Harold Sigurdsson. So there's my hair. I think it was Nanya that got it right, knitting therapist. I think she guessed hair. So large pat on the back for that. But yeah, he was a challenge to make, mostly because although you're given instructions on how to do it, it's not like you've got a pattern to follow. So you're creating the shape and the structure and everything yourself. I'm not totally convinced I got his legs in completely the right place in the original armature. I'm not totally convinced I got the shape of the head right in the original armature. So that made it quite challenging to build the shape out. And trying to get him into a realistic rabbit shape, well, hare shape I should say, so not a rabbit, was a challenge. I mean, his head's close to the right shape, close to it. I mean, he could have a bit more of a pronounced nose, I suppose, but it's pretty close. So yeah, it was a challenge, but I am quite pleased with how he's turned out. In fact, I'm very pleased with how he's turned out. I think he's rather cute, and he's going to sit somewhere and probably pop up in a few photos here, there, and everywhere. But, it led to some interesting Google searches, looking for images of wild Scottish hares, because that's what the kit said he was. And the kit is from the Crafty Kit Company, which is a Scottish company. So I looked up wild Scottish hares to get proportions and shapes and that sort of thing, not just the picture that's on the box. It's not something they recommend to do, actually, is to look up at pictures of hares to help you as you're shaping him. But I also, last night, Googled hares' tails, because he's got a little tail, and I wanted to work out how much I needed to cover his tail in brown and how much needed to be left white. And I'm like, I've seen domestic rabbits, but people don't keep pet hares. So yeah, so that is Harold the hare. I suppose I should call him Harold Harrison. But there's Harold. Might have to get him Viking sword and shield and armour. That might be taking it too far though. But anyway, that's my finished objects. So let's move on to my work in progress. As I said, I think I said earlier this video, I've been waffling so much I've lost track. But as regular viewers will probably be aware, I haven't done a great deal of knitting recently. Partly because we've had successive heat waves. Well, in 40-degree temperature in the UK, not fun to work with. So I am working on using up my leftover yarn from my Terra Nova sweater by knitting a flax light with stripes that I'm going to steek into a cardigan, because cardigans are nice and practical for transitional seasons like spring and autumn. So it's a little bit scratched up on the needles at the moment, and it will be until it's done, and I'll explain why in a minute. So here we go, there's my flax light. So we've got stripes coming in as I'm knitting through the colours that I've got left. So I'm trying to remember to add the new colour before I run out of the old colour. The flax light, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a raglan sweater by Tin Can Knits. It's part of their Simple Easy. It's part of one of their collection of beginner-friendly patterns. So nice basics for experienced knitters, but nice and easy instructions for those of you that have maybe not made garments and things before. They do size from pretty much newborn to the grave, and you're pretty much covered with a Tin Can Knits pattern for inclusivity. And the flax pattern, there's this garter panel over the shoulders and down the sleeves. So they do the flax in a heavier weight yarn, I think it's DK, possibly worsted, I don't know. I tend to go for fingering weight sweaters these days, occasionally a DK, but generally fingering weight, because I run hot. So the flax light is in a fingering weight. Now as I say, I'm going to steek this into a cardigan, so I have put a steek panel here at the front, so you can see I've got some purl stitches to mark out where my steek panel is, and I have got all the way through the initial setup knits, and I've added in the optional short rows, so I am ready to separate for the sleeves. And I'm doing it with air quotes because I'm not actually going to separate. My next step is to separate for the sleeves, but I'm going to do it without actually separating and add in steek panels either side of the sleeve, because I don't want to guesstimate how much yarn to leave at the end of my random sized leftovers from the Terra Nova, to make sure that I've got enough left for the sleeves and have the sleeves roughly matching up. So instead I'm going to steek them, and that way all my stripes are going to match up exactly the whole way down the body and the sleeves. Now I'm doing this with this yarn because it is not a superwash yarn. It is a pure wool, not specially chemically treated, and I know it steeks well because there were several steeks in the Terra Nova. So that's why I'm doing it with this yarn and not leftovers from other projects. I mean, you can steek with superwash wool, but you'd want to be using a sewing machine to reinforce them, and I tend to use crochet reinforcement. It tidies up the edge, it doesn't really reinforce much, but I know it's going to work well with this particular yarn because it felts easily, and because I've done it already. I've stitched with that yarn before. So I am going to be filming the next row or two as I separate for the sleeves and put those steek stitches in, before I then carry on knitting all the way down to the end of the sleeves or the body, whichever comes first. And then I will be filming again to show the steeks being cut open and how I'm going to seal up the seams that are going to be formed under the arms and down the sides. So that will be all put together in one video and won't be coming out till I finish the cardigan. But that is on its way, probably October, November time. Probably. No promises. But that's where I'm guesstimating I'm likely to finish that cardigan. Would it be nice if I'd have been able to finish it sooner so that I can wear it when the weather finally starts to turn cold. It's not that hot at the moment. We're bobbling around late teens, early 20s, but I mean, I walk to work so I get warm on the way in. But, hopefully the weather will be alright sort of end of October, beginning of November for me to be wearing cardigans rather than heavier sweaters, but we'll see. I'm also going to need to find some buttons for it. I haven't thought about that. I'm not at the point where I'm going to be trying to put a zip into a cardigan. Not when it's not in the instructions anyway, because I've not done that before. But yeah, so that's my work in progress. So, yeah, that's on the cards. That's my plan, is to get that done. And I've got a few other projects on the go. I've got some sewing to catch up with, as I say. A few other knitting projects that are partway through that need finishing. So a little, what else? I've got a couple of cross stitches. I've got embroidery to finish. My craft section of my Kanban board is right there. That's what I'm looking at. So yeah. Oh, I haven't done any English paper piecing for a while. That needs working on. My scrap blankets need working on. My crochet blankets need working on. I've got tablet weaving to finish. I've got a sweater I started years ago. I really ought to get finished. So yeah, so I've got plenty to be getting on with. We'll see how much gets done next month. Okay, so I aim to put a video out every weekend, and if you've enjoyed spending time in my company, I'd love to see you in the next one. But until then, happy crafting and bye bye for now.